In a small town nestled between rolling hills and vast farmland, where everyone knew each other by name, there lived a man who stood out, not because he was loud or flashy, but because of his sheer size. His name was Carl, and to most people, he was just that big guy. He wasn't particularly tall, but his frame was broad, his arms thick like tree trunks, and his belly rounded in a way that suggested years of indulgence rather than discipline. People often whispered behind his back, assuming his weight came from late-night snacks and greasy fast food. But no one dared say it to his face. Something about him radiated quiet confidence, a calmness that made people think twice before crossing. Carl's daily routine rarely changed. Every morning he woke up early, drank a cup of black coffee and headed straight to the local gym, a modest building with peeling paint on its walls and creaky floors that groaned underfoot. It wasn't fancy, but it served its purpose for the townsfolk who wanted to stay fit. Most people at the gym were predictable, young men flexing their muscles in front of mirrors, middle-aged women jogging on treadmills while scrolling through their phones, and seniors doing slow stretches near the water cooler. Carl, however, didn't fit into any of these categories. He always wore baggy sweatpants and oversized hoodies that hid his massive frame, making it hard for anyone to guess what he actually did inside the gym. Some assumed he stuck to light weights or maybe walked on the treadmill for a few minutes before leaving. Others thought he might be too lazy to try anything serious. After all, how could someone who looked so, well, soft, possibly be athletic? Nobody bothered asking him directly. Carl wasn't unfriendly. He greeted people with a polite nod or a brief smile, but he kept mostly to himself, preferring solitude over conversation. What most people failed to notice was that Carl had a routine as precise as clockwork. He arrived at the gym every day at exactly 7 a.m., never a minute late or early. Once inside, he'd head straight to the locker room, change into his workout clothes, and grab a pair of worn-out gloves hanging neatly on a hook. Then, he'd make his way to the heavy punching bag stationed in the corner of the room. This particular bag had seen better days. Its leather surface was cracked and patched in places, and the chain holding it up squeaked with every movement. To Carl, though, it was perfect. For hours he worked on the bag, throwing punches with a rhythm that seemed almost musical. Jab, cross, jab, hook, uppercut. It went on, each strike landing with a thud that echoed through the otherwise quiet space. If you listened closely, you could hear the difference between a jab and a hook, the sharp crack versus the deep boom. There was precision in every move, power behind every blow. Yet Carl never grunted or shouted like some fighters did when training. Instead, he remained eerily silent, his focus unbroken, his breathing steady. Occasionally, curious gym-goers would steal glances at him, wondering why such a large man spent so much time hitting a bag instead of lifting weights or running laps. A few brave souls even approached him once or twice, asking casually, "Hey buddy, what are you training for?" Carl's response was always the same, a faint smile followed by a simple, "I have my reasons." That answer left more questions than answers, but no one pressed further. Something about Carl's demeanor told them not to pry. Despite his mysterious habits, Carl wasn't entirely invisible. Over time, people began noticing little things about him. The way his hands moved with incredible speed despite their size, the slight bounce in his step as he circled the bag, the beads of sweat dripping down his forehead even during the coldest mornings. These details hinted at something extraordinary beneath the surface, though no one could quite put their finger on it. One day, a new member joined the gym, a young man named Jake, who fancied himself a bit of a fighter. Jake strutted around in flashy workout gear, boasting about his amateur boxing matches and challenging anyone who looked remotely fit to spar with him. When he spotted Carl working on the punching bag, he smirked and said loudly enough for others to hear, "Man, you're huge. Ever thought about stepping into the ring? You'd crush anyone with those arms." Carl paused mid-punch, turned slowly toward Jake, and gave him a long, measured look. For a moment, Jake felt a chill run down his spine, though he couldn't explain why. Finally, Carl replied in his usual calm tone, "Boxing isn't about crushing. It's about control." With that, he resumed his workout, leaving Jake standing there, unsure of what to say next. As weeks turned into months, Carl continued his quiet existence, blending into the background of the gym while quietly honing his craft. Unbeknownst to those around him, he was preparing for something that would soon change not only his life but also the way everyone saw him. Until then, Carl remained content to let people think whatever they wanted. After all, he had learned long ago that appearances could be deceiving, and sometimes the truth revealed itself in the most unexpected ways. The whispers about Carl persisted, growing louder with each passing day. Was he hiding a secret? Did he used to compete professionally? Or was he simply wasting his time pounding away at a battered old punching bag? No one knew for sure, but one thing was certain. Carl wasn't just another face in the crowd, and sooner or later the world would find out exactly who and what he really was. The small-town gym where Carl spent his mornings was usually a peaceful place. The hum of treadmills, the clinking of dumbbells, and the occasional grunt from someone lifting heavy weights created a predictable rhythm. Most people came here to escape the stresses of their daily lives, finding solace in routine and exercise. But one fateful evening, that peace was shattered by two loud, obnoxious men who stumbled into the gym like a storm rolling into a quiet harbor. It was close to closing time when they arrived. Two rough-looking guys in their late 20s with unkempt hair, scruffy beards, and clothes that reeked of alcohol. They weren't regulars, no one recognized them. Their entrance drew immediate attention as they swaggered past the front desk without signing in, laughing loudly and making crude jokes. One of them carried an open beer can, sloshing liquid onto the floor as he walked. The other slapped a nearby weight bench hard enough to make it wobble, shouting, "Yo, check out these losers trying to get buff." The gym manager, a wiry man named Tom, approached cautiously, attempting to maintain order. "Hey guys," he said, forcing a smile. "You need to sign in before using the equipment, and we don't allow drinks inside." The taller of the two men sneered at him, taking another swig from his beer. "Relax, buddy. We're just here to have some fun. What's the big deal?" Tom hesitated, glancing nervously at the other patrons. Some had already stopped working out, watching the scene unfold with growing unease. Others pretended not to notice, focusing intently on their machines or phones, hoping the disturbance would pass quickly. But the tension in the air was palpable. Meanwhile, Carl was seated on a bench near the punching bag, calmly stretching his legs after an intense session. He hadn't paid much attention to the commotion at first, but now he raised his head slightly, observing the situation with sharp, calculating eyes. His presence seemed to go unnoticed by the intruders, at least for the moment. The shorter man, emboldened by his friend's attitude, began wandering around the gym, mocking anyone within earshot. He pointed at a young woman jogging on a treadmill and jeered, "Look at this chick running like her life depends on it. Bet she couldn't outrun me if she tried." Then he turned to a teenage boy lifting light dumbbells and laughed. "Aw, how cute. Junior thinks he's going to be the next Hulk." Each insult sent ripples of discomfort through the room, but no one dared confront the duo. Everyone knew better than to pick a fight with drunk troublemakers, especially ones who looked ready to throw punches. The atmosphere grew heavier with each passing second, like clouds gathering before a thunderstorm. Then, inevitably, the shorter man's gaze landed on Carl. At first he squinted, as if trying to figure out why such a large figure wasn't reacting to the chaos around him. When realization dawned, a cruel grin spread across his face. He nudged his taller companion and gestured toward Carl. "Hey, check this dude out," he slurred loudly. "Bet he couldn't throw a punch if his life depended on it. Look at him. Probably spends all day eating burgers and fries." His words echoed through the gym, drawing snickers from a few nervous bystanders. The taller man joined in, pointing at Carl and adding, "Yeah, man. You think you're tough? Prove it. Come on, fatty, show us what you've got." For a moment, there was complete silence. All eyes turned to Carl, waiting to see how he would respond. Some expected anger, others braced for confrontation, but Carl simply sat there unmoving. His expression remained calm, almost indifferent, as though he hadn't heard the insults at all. The two men exchanged smug looks, clearly pleased with themselves for getting under his skin, or so they thought. But then something shifted. Carl slowly stood up, his towering frame casting a shadow over the pair. Up close, he was even more imposing than they'd realized. His muscles weren't hidden under baggy clothes anymore. Years of training had sculpted his body into a powerhouse. Even his posture exuded authority, shoulders squared and chin held high. For the first time, the two men faltered, their bravado wavering slightly. "Did you say something?" Carl asked, his voice low and steady, carrying an edge that silenced the entire room. The taller man recovered quickly, stepping forward with a cocky smirk. "Yeah, I said you look like a joke, man. Big guy like you should be able to handle yourself, right? Or are you all talk and no action?" Carl didn't respond immediately. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, studying the man as if sizing him up. Then, with deliberate slowness, he removed his gloves and placed them neatly on the bench behind him. Every movement was controlled, calculated, giving off an aura of lethal calmness. By now, everyone in the gym had stopped what they were doing, forming a loose circle around the unfolding drama. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Is he really going to do it? Man, this is going to get ugly. I hope Carl doesn't hurt them too bad. Finally, Carl spoke again, his tone icy. You wanted to see if I can handle myself, he said, locking eyes with the taller man. Let's find out. Before either of the intruders could react, Carl closed the distance between them in 2 quick strides. In one fluid motion, he delivered a devastating punch to the taller man's jaw, a blow so powerful it lifted him off his feet and sent him crashing to the floor, unconscious before he even hit the ground. Gasps erupted from the crowd as the shorter man stumbled backward, dropping his beer can in shock. What the? He stammered, raising his fists defensively. But Carl was already moving. With lightning-fast reflexes, he pivoted gracefully, landing a second punch square in the shorter man's face. The impact was instantaneous. The man crumpled like a rag doll, joining his friend in a heap on the floor. For a few heartbeats, the only sound in the gym was the faint hum of the air conditioning. Then, slowly, applause began to ripple through the crowd. People cheered, clapped, and whistled, their earlier fear replaced by awe and admiration. Carl, however, showed no sign of satisfaction. He straightened up, brushed imaginary dust off his hands, and glanced down at the unconscious men with a mixture of pity and disdain. Sometimes, he muttered loud enough for everyone to hear, people mistake size for weakness. Don't make assumptions about someone until you understand what they're capable of. With that, he turned away, grabbed his gloves, and headed toward the locker room as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Behind him, the gym buzzed with excitement, the story of the Knockout King already spreading like wildfire. Little did Carl know this incident would change his life forever and expose secrets he had worked so hard to keep hidden. The gym was abuzz with energy the next morning, but it wasn't the usual hum of weights clinking or treadmills whirring. Instead, excited chatter filled the air as people gathered in clusters, reliving every detail of the previous night's events. "Did you see that punch?" one man exclaimed, mimicking Carl's motion with exaggerated force. "It was like a freight train," another added. "I didn't think anyone could move that fast. He's built like a tank, but he hits like lightning." Word had spread quickly throughout the town. By sunrise, nearly everyone knew about the mysterious big guy who had single-handedly taken down 2 troublemakers without breaking a sweat. Videos of the incident surfaced online almost instantly, filmed by someone who had been secretly recording the confrontation on their phone. Within hours, the footage went viral, racking up thousands of views and sparking debates across social media. Commenters were divided between those praising Carl's skill and others speculating about his background. Who was this man? Was he a retired boxer, a mixed martial artist, or perhaps some kind of secret government operative trained in hand-to-hand combat? Back at the gym, curiosity reached a fever pitch. Regulars who had previously paid little attention to Carl now watched him closely, trying to piece together clues about his past. When he walked in that morning, dressed in his usual baggy hoodie and sweatpants, the room fell silent. For a moment, all eyes were on him, studying his every step, but Carl acted as if nothing unusual had happened. He nodded politely at the few people who greeted him, made his way to the locker room, and emerged moments later ready for another workout. As the day wore on, reporters began arriving, eager to interview the man behind the viral video. Local news crews set up cameras outside the gym, while bloggers and podcast hosts flooded the manager's phone with requests for access. One particularly persistent journalist even tried sneaking into the building, only to be promptly escorted out by Tom, the wiry gym manager. "Look," Tom told them firmly, "Carl doesn't want any part of this circus. If he wants to talk, he'll do it on his own terms." Despite the growing chaos, Carl remained unfazed. He moved through the gym as he always did, methodically, working on his routines without acknowledging the crowd or the cameras peeking through the windows. His focus never wavered, not even when a group of teenagers approached him during a break, asking timidly if they could take a picture with him. To everyone's surprise, Carl smiled warmly and agreed, posing patiently as flashbulbs popped around him. It was a rare glimpse of the man beneath the stoic exterior, a side that hinted at kindness and humility, despite his intimidating presence. But the attention didn't stop there. Over the following days, more challenges came rolling in. Local, tough guys, wannabe fighters, and even a few seasoned boxers from neighboring towns showed up at the gym, hoping to test their mettle against the Knockout King. Each challenger brought their own bravado, boasting loudly about how they'd be the one to finally take Carl down. Some claimed they'd studied his technique in the videos, analyzing his movements frame by frame. Others simply relied on sheer arrogance, convinced that size alone couldn't win a fight. Carl handled each challenge with the same calm demeanor. He never sought out fights, nor did he instigate conflict. But when someone stepped into his space and demanded a showdown, he accepted without hesitation. What followed was always the same, a flurry of precise punches delivered with devastating speed and power. None of the challengers lasted more than a minute before collapsing onto the mat, utterly defeated. One particularly memorable encounter involved a burly bouncer named Marcus, known for his brute strength and aggressive fighting style. Marcus strutted into the gym with a cocky grin, flexing his arms for the crowd. "All right, big guy," he taunted, pointing at Carl. "Let's see if you're as tough as everyone says. I bet I can crush you in 10 seconds flat." Carl didn't respond verbally. Instead, he removed his gloves, cracked his knuckles, and stood silently, waiting for Marcus to make the first move. The tension in the room was electric as spectators formed a tight circle around the pair. When Marcus lunged forward with a wild haymaker, Carl sidestepped effortlessly, countering with a sharp jab to the ribs. Before Marcus could recover, Carl landed a thunderous uppercut that sent him sprawling backward. The entire gym erupted in cheers as Marcus lay sprawled on the floor, groaning in pain. Afterward, Carl offered his hand to help Marcus up, a gesture that left many speechless. "You've got heart," Carl said quietly, pulling the dazed bouncer to his feet. "But remember, confidence is good, but don't confuse it with recklessness." These words became a recurring theme in Carl's interactions. Whether addressing a defeated opponent or mentoring young athletes, he emphasized the importance of discipline, respect, and self-control. "Fighting isn't about proving dominance," he often explained. "It's about understanding your limits and knowing when to push past them. True strength comes from character, not just muscles." Despite his growing fame, Carl refused to let the spotlight change him. He continued his daily routine at the gym, focusing on his craft rather than seeking validation. When asked why he fought so skillfully yet lived such a quiet life, he gave the same cryptic answer: "I have my reasons." Over time, however, fragments of his backstory began to emerge. An old friend of Carl's, a former amateur boxer named Mike, decided to speak publicly about their shared history. In an interview with a local newspaper, Mike revealed that Carl had been training in combat sports since childhood, mastering everything from boxing to Muay Thai to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He was born with natural talent, Mike recalled, but what set him apart was his dedication. While other kids played video games or hung out, Carl spent hours perfecting his technique. He treated every session like it mattered. Mike also shed light on Carl's decision to live a low-profile life. According to him, Carl had turned down numerous opportunities to compete professionally, choosing instead to work odd jobs and mentor younger fighters. He didn't care about fame or money, Mike said. For Carl, it was never about winning trophies or earning titles. It was about using his skills responsibly to protect himself and others when necessary. This revelation only deepened the public's admiration for Carl. People marveled at his humility, contrasting it sharply with the egos of modern-day athletes and celebrities. Even those who had initially dismissed him as just fat now saw him in a new light. As a true master of his craft, someone whose quiet confidence spoke volumes. Yet amidst the praise and accolades, Carl remained grounded. He avoided interviews, declined sponsorship offers, and politely declined invitations to high-profile tournaments. "Some things are better left unsaid," he told Tom one evening after turning down yet another reporter. Not everything needs to be shared with the world. Still, Carl couldn't escape the ripple effects of his newfound fame. Young fighters from across the region started flocking to the gym, hoping to learn from the legendary Knockout King. At first, Carl resisted, insisting he wasn't a teacher. But eventually, he relented, agreeing to mentor a select group of promising athletes. Under his guidance, these young men and women flourished, developing not only physical prowess but also mental resilience and emotional maturity. Through it all, Carl stayed true to himself. He wasn't interested in glory or recognition. His goal was simple: to inspire others to strive for greatness both inside and outside the ring. And though he never sought the title of hero, his actions spoke louder than words. Slowly but surely, Carl's legacy began to take shape, not as a fighter, but as a symbol of strength, humility, and unwavering integrity. Little did he know, however, that his journey was far from over. As the weeks passed, whispers of another challenge began circulating, a match unlike any he had faced before. This time the stakes would be higher, the pressure greater, and the outcome uncertain. But if there was one thing Carl had proven time and again, it was that he thrived under adversity. Whatever lay ahead, the Knockout King was ready. As Carl's fame continued to grow, so did the questions surrounding his past. The public's fascination with the Knockout King reached new heights, fueled by endless speculation and theories about who he really was. Was he a retired professional fighter, a military veteran trained in elite combat techniques, or perhaps an underground legend whose battles had gone unnoticed until now? The mystery only deepened when snippets of Carl's history began to surface, each revelation painting a more complex picture of the man behind the quiet demeanor. One day, a local journalist named Sarah decided to dig deeper. Unlike her peers, who were content with superficial interviews and recycled rumors, Sarah wanted to uncover the truth. She spent weeks researching Carl's background, tracking down old acquaintances, poring over dusty archives, and piecing together fragments of information that others had overlooked. Her breakthrough came when she stumbled upon an old photograph tucked away in a forgotten scrapbook at the town library. The photo showed a much younger Carl standing alongside a group of children, all wearing karate uniforms and holding trophies. In the background stood a stern-looking man with salt-and-pepper hair, Carl's father. According to the caption, the image was taken at a regional martial arts tournament nearly 2 decades ago. Intrigued, Sarah tracked down one of the organizers, a retired instructor named Mr. Thompson, who vividly remembered Carl's early years. Carl was different from the start, Mr. Thompson recalled during their interview. Most kids joined martial arts classes because their parents wanted them to stay active or learn discipline. But Carl, he seemed driven by something deeper. He practiced relentlessly, always pushing himself harder than anyone else. Even as a teenager, he had this incredible focus, a laser-like determination that set him apart. Mr. Thompson went on to explain how Carl's father played a pivotal role in shaping his son's journey. A former soldier turned martial artist, Carl, Sr. believed strongly in the value of self-defense and mental fortitude. He instilled these principles in his son from a young age, teaching him not just how to fight but also how to think strategically and act responsibly. Carl wasn't raised to be aggressive, Mr. Thompson emphasized. His father drilled into him the idea that true strength lies in restraint, not in domination. That philosophy became the foundation of everything Carl did. Armed with this newfound knowledge, Sarah published an in-depth article titled, "The Making of a Legend." Who is Carl? The piece quickly gained traction, offering readers a rare glimpse into Carl's formative years. It revealed how he had competed in countless tournaments as a youth, earning accolades for his technical precision and sportsmanship. Yet despite his success, Carl never sought recognition. After graduating high school, he quietly stepped away from competitive fighting, choosing instead to live a life of anonymity while continuing to hone his skills in private. The article sparked both admiration and curiosity. For many, it provided answers to lingering questions about Carl's abilities. But for others, it raised even more. Why had he walked away from competition? What drove him to keep training in solitude for so many years? And most importantly, why had he chosen to reveal his talents now after decades of secrecy? Carl, however, remained tight-lipped. When reporters pressed him for comments, he simply shrugged and said, "Everyone has chapters they'd rather leave closed. Mine are no different." His cryptic response only added fuel to the fire, leaving people hungry for more details. Amidst the growing media frenzy, another twist emerged, one that would shed light on Carl's decision to embrace his newfound role as a mentor. One evening, a young woman named Emily approached Carl at the gym, tears streaming down her face. She introduced herself as the daughter of a close friend of Carl's late father. "My dad used to talk about you all the time," she said hesitantly. "He said you were like a second son to him. I didn't believe it until I saw those videos online." Emily explained that her father, a retired police officer, had recently passed away after battling cancer. Before his death, he had confided in her about a promise he made to Carl Sr. to ensure that Carl's legacy lived on. "He told me stories about how your dad saved lives using his skills," Emily continued. "Not just physically, but emotionally too. He taught people how to stand up for themselves, how to find courage when they felt powerless. My dad always hoped you'd carry that torch someday." For the first time since the chaos began, Carl's stoic exterior cracked. He listened intently as Emily spoke, his eyes softening with emotion. When she finished, he placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and said, "Your dad was a good man. I owe him and my father more than words can express." That conversation marked a turning point for Carl. While he still valued his privacy, he realized that his story had the potential to inspire others in ways he hadn't anticipated. Over the following weeks, he started opening up, slowly and selectively, sharing bits of his past with trusted friends and mentees. He spoke about the sacrifices his father had made, the lessons he had learned, and the importance of using one's gifts for the greater good. One evening, during a particularly heartfelt session with his young protege, Carl shared a story that left everyone speechless. "When I was 16, he began, I got into a bad situation. Some bullies cornered me outside school trying to provoke a fight. I could have easily taken them down, but my dad's voice kept ringing in my head. Strength isn't about hurting others, he used to say. It's about protecting them. So instead of throwing a punch, I walked away. Those bullies laughed at me then, calling me weak. But years later, one of them came to me and apologized. He said seeing me walk away changed his perspective, that it made him rethink what real strength meant." The room fell silent as Carl concluded. Sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought with fists. They're fought within ourselves. Learning when to fight and when to hold back is what defines us. His words resonated deeply with those around him, especially the younger generation eager to follow in his footsteps. Inspired by his example, several of Carl's students began volunteering at community centers, teaching self-defense classes to underprivileged youth. Others organized fundraisers to support anti-bullying campaigns, determined to spread Carl's message of empowerment and respect. Meanwhile, Carl's influence extended beyond the gym. Local schools invited him to speak at assemblies, where he encouraged students to channel their energy into positive pursuits. Community leaders praised him for fostering a culture of resilience and unity, qualities sorely needed in a world often divided by fear and misunderstanding. Yet despite his growing impact, Carl remained humble. He refused to take credit for the changes happening around him, insisting that the real heroes were the individuals brave enough to step forward and make a difference. "I'm just a guy who happens to know how to throw a punch," he joked during one interview. The real work is being done by people willing to stand up, not just for themselves, but for others. As months passed, Carl's story evolved from one of individual triumph to collective inspiration. People began referring to him not just as the Knockout King, but as a symbol of hope, a reminder that true greatness stems not from physical prowess, but from character, compassion, and purpose. But even as Carl embraced his role as a mentor and role model, whispers of a looming challenge began to circulate. Rumors spread of a mysterious opponent, a seasoned fighter with ties to the underground circuit, who had issued a formal challenge to Carl. This wasn't just any match. It was billed as the ultimate test of skill, endurance, and willpower. The stakes were higher than ever before, and the pressure mounted with each passing day. Yet if there was one thing Carl had proven time and again, it was his ability to rise above adversity. Whatever lay ahead, he faced it with the same calm determination that had defined his journey thus far. Little did anyone know, this upcoming battle would unearth secrets even Carl himself hadn't fully confronted. Secrets that would force him to confront not only his opponents but also the shadows of his own past. The day of the mysterious challenge arrived, casting a shadow over the town that had grown to admire Carl so deeply. Rumors swirled about the identity of his opponent, a man known only as the Phantom, a fighter shrouded in secrecy who operated within the underground circuit. Some claimed he was unbeatable. Others whispered that he fought with ruthless precision, leaving opponents not just defeated but broken. The match was set to take place in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, far from prying eyes and official scrutiny. It wasn't sanctioned or regulated, it was raw, brutal, and dangerous. Carl knew what he was walking into. He'd heard the stories, seen the grainy videos leaked online showing the Phantom dismantling seasoned fighters with cold efficiency. But instead of fear, Carl felt a strange sense of clarity. This wasn't just about proving himself anymore. It was about standing up for something greater. Over the past months, he had become a symbol of hope for many people. The bullied kids learning self-defense, the young athletes striving for excellence, the everyday men and women inspired by his humility and strength. If he backed down now, he would be letting them all down. On the evening of the fight, a small group gathered at the warehouse. Hand-picked friends, loyal students, and a few curious onlookers brave enough to venture into the unknown. Among them was Emily, the daughter of Carl's father's old friend. She stood nervously near the makeshift ring, clutching a worn photograph of Carl and her dad together. For her, this fight represented more than just a clash of fists. It was a test of everything Carl believed in, the values passed down through generations. When Carl entered the dimly lit space, the crowd parted respectfully, their eyes fixed on him. His expression was calm, almost serene, betraying none of the tension simmering beneath the surface. Across the room, the Phantom emerged from the shadows, his face obscured by a hood. Unlike Carl, who carried himself with quiet dignity, the Phantom exuded menace, every step deliberate, every movement calculated to intimidate. As the two men faced each other in the center of the ring, a hush fell over the audience. There were no referees, no rules, just two fighters preparing to settle their differences the old-fashioned way. Before the first bell rang, the Phantom spoke, his voice low and menacing. "You think you're a hero? A legend? Tonight I'll show everyone exactly how fragile your reputation really is." Carl didn't respond. Instead, he nodded slightly, signaling that he was ready. And then, the fight began. From the opening moments, it was clear that this was unlike any bout Carl had ever faced. The Phantom moved like a predator, striking quickly and retreating before Carl could counter. Each blow landed with precision, targeting weak points and exploiting openings Carl hadn't even realized existed. Despite his years of training, Carl found himself struggling to keep pace. Blood trickled from a cut above his eyebrow, and his breathing grew labored as the rounds wore on. But Carl didn't panic. Even when the Phantom knocked him to the ground for the first time, a moment that drew gasps from the crowd, he rose steadily, dusting himself off as if shaking off a minor inconvenience. Something inside him refused to give up. With every punch thrown, every dodge executed, he tapped into reserves of strength and resilience he hadn't known he possessed. Slowly but surely, Carl adapted, reading the Phantom's patterns and finding ways to counterattack. By the third round, the tide began to turn. Carl's patience paid off as he started landing punches of his own, each one delivered with surgical accuracy. The Phantom faltered, his movements becoming less fluid, his confidence shaken. When Carl unleashed a devastating combination, a jab cross hook uppercut sequence honed over decades of practice, it sent the Phantom stumbling backward, crashing to the floor. For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Then, applause erupted from the crowd, echoing through the cavernous warehouse. Carl stepped back, lowering his fists, and extended a hand to help his opponent up. To everyone's surprise, the Phantom accepted it, rising unsteadily to his feet. Though battered and bruised, he managed a grudging nod of respect. "You're stronger than I thought," the Phantom admitted, his voice tinged with both bitterness and admiration. Maybe there's truth to those stories after all. Carl didn't gloat or boast. Instead, he replied simply, "Strength isn't about breaking someone else. It's about knowing when to stop and when to offer a hand." In the days that followed, news of the fight spread like wildfire. Videos surfaced online, capturing not just the physical battle but also the moment of mutual respect between Carl and the Phantom. Commentators hailed it as one of the most remarkable displays of sportsmanship they'd ever seen. For Carl, however, the victory wasn't about personal glory. It was validation, not of his skills, but of the principles he lived by. With his reputation cemented, Carl continued mentoring young fighters, teaching them not only how to throw a punch but also how to carry themselves with integrity. He expanded his efforts beyond the gym, partnering with local schools and community centers to create programs focused on self-discipline, conflict resolution, and mental health. His message resonated deeply, especially among teenagers struggling to find their place in the world. One afternoon, as Carl sat alone in the locker room reflecting on his journey, Emily approached him with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. "Because of you, I feel like my dad's legacy lives on, not just in me but in everyone you've touched." Carl smiled gently, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Your dad taught me that true strength comes from lifting others up. If I've done even half of what he did, then I've succeeded." Over time, Carl's story became a beacon of hope, not just locally, but globally. People from all walks of life looked to him as a proof that greatness isn't defined by fame or fortune but by the impact we have on those around us. From the gym where it all began to the farthest corners of the internet, Carl's legacy endured, a testament to the power of humility, perseverance, and unwavering character. And though whispers of new challenges occasionally reached his ears, Carl remained steadfast in his mission. He wasn't just the knockout king anymore, he was a teacher, a mentor, and a symbol of strength rooted in compassion. As long as there were people willing to learn and grow, Carl knew his work was far from over. For Carl, the real knockout wasn't the punches he threw, it was the lives he transformed along the way.